to my surprise, many of them were stage 4 on palliative therapy and basically sent home to die. And when their tumor started turning around and they went into remission after several months, I couldn't believe it. It was like, what? Why didn't they know about this at the university hospitals? Why wasn't anyone teaching this? And so what we're seeing is these estrogen mimetics. In fact, I have 3 patients. One has prostate cancer. His 2 buddies have prostate hyperplasia. They all play golf, and guess what? They're all drinking all day long on the golf course out of plastic bottles.
My entire career of being in the medical industry, I dislike band-aiding. And what I mean by band-aiding, for those that may not understand the term, is giving someone something they have to take every month or they can't function. I like to fix the source problem. What we need to understand is 70% of immune function is tied to the gut bacteria. If we don't have the proper gut bacteria, again, like I said earlier, you're going to be functioning on 30% immune. Yes, you can live, but the problem is you're susceptible to a lot of things, and you don't have to be.
Well, we know for sure as we age, both our risk of obvious heart disease and sadly our risk of cancer both go up. So there's a lot of overlap in my patients with breast cancer, prostate cancer, other, common colorectal cancers, melanoma, of course, and some of the young people have it too, sadly. Is it accumulated toxins and environmental toxins? Is it genetics that just take time to alter our metabolism and lead to enough growth and enough cellular damage to show up as heart disease or cancer? All these are possible.
We can do so many things right, and if we're getting a couple things really, really wrong or really off, then all those amazing things that we're doing aren't going to work as well. And so it really is kind of like a puzzle. Like once we get enough pieces in place, then we can see the full picture. And that's really what we're looking for. If you can open up your belief that you can heal instantaneously, even with cancer, there's important medicine just in changing that belief. So we can upgrade our beliefs. We can upgrade our thought streams once we become aware of them. And we can actually do this consciously.
Looking at your fears as an opportunity to grow and thrive.
The idea that genes turn on and off by themselves is a complete fabrication. It's not true at all.
The number one toxin in the room is emotional trauma. It's kind of hard to escape life without trauma.
They were going to call it a magic bullet, a biological response modifier, they called it. We've got them.
The use of pharmaceutical drugs to mask symptoms and to be proposed and marketed as a treatment for any symptom or illness is a fraud. There is not a single symptom that a human being has ever had in their whole life. A fever, a cough, a sweats, a rash, a diarrhea. No one has ever had a symptom, ever, or a diagnosis of cancer that was caused by a prescription drug deficiency. And if that's not what's causing your symptom or your illness, why are you using those things as the therapy to dismiss the symptom or address the problem?
Welcome back to the Conquering Cancer docuseries. I'm your host, Nathan Crane, and in this episode, we're exploring the true causes of cancer that most doctors aren't talking about. I emphasize the word most because, fortunately for us, there are some true pioneers in this field, doctors, researchers, and health advocates who stand head and shoulders above the others when it comes to recognizing why some people get cancer and others don't, and they're also very passionate about sharing their knowledge. These are caring people who want to give you the life-saving information that teaches you how to avoid getting these chronic diseases in the first place and how to heal from them if you're already sick. We have some incredible experts lined up for you, including one of the top integrative cancer doctors in the world and a renowned cardiologist, plus 2 other amazing health researchers. You don't want to miss a single moment of this episode. Professor Dr. Dana Flavin, MD, also known as the Cancer Whisperer, is one of the top integrative cancer doctors in the world. She's been researching for 40 plus years and has studied with 5 doctoral disciplines, including chemistry, pharmacology, toxicology, biochemistry, and medicine. In addition to being an MD, she became an ND, a naturopathic doctor, out of academic curiosity. Dr. Flavin was also the top toxicologist at the FDA and an advisor to the National Cancer Institute for decades. Dr. Flavin has helped reverse many kinds of cancers in all stages in patients around the world and continues to consult with colleagues internationally on complicated cancer cases. She started her nonprofit, ColMed, which is the Foundation for Collaborative Medicine and Research, and is working on a book because she wants everyone to have access to the information they need to heal from cancer. Dr. Flavin is someone who really knows her stuff when it comes to what causes cancer and how to heal from it, even when it's stage 4 and patients have been sent home to die. In this first part of my interview with Dr. Flavin, we dig into why so many patients don't end up healing as they could have. And we cover some key causes of cancer that we can protect ourselves against. So let's dive in. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Nathan. You're embarrassing me. I feel like I'm some sort of an intellectual mad person, but you can't learn enough to save a life. And the thing is, to me, cancer was the most complicated thing I had ever seen. All the other autoimmune diseases were simple and viral diseases were simple. But when it came to cancer, it was so smart. It could out-manipulate just about any new drug on the market. And I didn't even get into it until 1992 because I felt we had enough with conventional medicine, until I kept getting people coming to me where either they had no money, no conventional medicine, no health insurance, and we had to do something. So I began applying the things that I had learned, and I was quite surprised. It works. It works.
Well,
Amazing.
that's one thing I love about what you do is you research, you're so open-minded, and then you actually try it with your patients. You say, look, here's something that can help. Here's some great studies that support it. It shows that it's safe and effective. This patient has brain cancer or breast cancer, whatever it is. Let's try it. Let's see. And what happens? And then you get results. And then now you have, these incredible anecdotes and case studies. And I think when we spoke a couple of years ago, when I first met you and did my very first interview with you, you had told me that you had worked with thousands of patients and you had helped or seen hundreds or even thousands, please correct me if I'm wrong, of cases of cancer actually reversed using natural, holistic, or integrative methods. Is that true? Is that right?
Yes. And to my surprise, many of them were stage 4 on palliative therapy and basically sent home to die. And when their tumor started turning around and they went into remission after several months, I couldn't believe it. It was like, what? Why didn't they know about this at the university hospitals? Why wasn't anyone teaching this?
Why is that?
Well, let me put it this way. There's huge investments that go into the university hospitals and into the healthcare systems that are profiting particular individuals, companies, and so on. And because of this, they're linked together with the insurance companies, and the insurance companies not only pay for the medications of the investors or companies that are profitable. So you see hand in hand this whole thing, and this is where it's for me extremely, how can I put it? Disappointing is one thing, but I would actually use something stronger than that, except I'd rather not, except to say that it is not fair to the patients to be limiting their support only to the financial interests of particular companies just to do studies. It's wrong. And what we're seeing now with the way cancers are reversing with complementary alternative medicine, off-label drugs, and so on, that's why I need to get more information out. We're trying to get a book finished just so everyone knows what I know, and I can take a breather, probably for a week or two. But at least then we can get the information out, because I don't care who knows what I know. I mean, I put in 40 years of my life, not for me, but basically to help those individuals who needed the help. And from my own personal background, having a breast tumor at age 20 when they were going to do a radical mastectomy. And it was 2 months after my best friend was killed. So I realized this year, believe it or not, I realized, oh my God, that was probably stress. And now I realize from many of my patients that it's the stress that induces many of these cancers because the immune system goes down. And that's the most important thing against cancer is our immune system.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about, that ties in right into, viruses and the pandemic that we've seen. And, because there's the immune system is really the link there, right? I mean, the immune system is everything when it comes to cancer, but also when it comes to, cancers from within, right? Whereas something that we might call a viral infection or bacterial infection, or fungal infection, that's more from without, but it's also from within as well in a different way. Maybe you can talk about that, the links between viruses and cancer, and the links between the immune system and what people need to know. Do we need to be deathly afraid of viruses for the rest of our lives and lock ourselves in our homes and mask ourselves and take drugs for the rest of our lives, or is there better things we can be doing?
Well, there are better things that we can be doing. There are 4 viruses, however, that do cause cancer. Excuse me, we know this. Epstein-Barr virus is one, hepatitis is one, HIV is one, and let's see, papilloma, of course, is the other one. And those 4 all have one thing in common. They increase something in the body called interleukin 10, which shuts down the lymphocytes that are the natural killer cells. So this is something that I've been working on. I actually have reversed many of these cancers, HIV, hepatitis, Epstein-Barr. It's published too. And in fact, I did it naturally and I raised the immune system. And again, like you're saying, the immune system. Simple things like olive leaf. Olive leaf releases interferon. Zinc is super important. And this is where when I look around at any viral infections, and I don't care if it's the flu or it's a coronavirus or whatever it is, if our vitamin D levels are down, our zinc levels are down, our vitamin C levels are down, and we're stressed, then we're not protected against any virus. So we really have to look at that. And that has to do with diet and relaxation, meditation, prayer, whatever one is into in order to calm down one's stress levels. But the stress levels nowadays are really, really high. And this is where I think that we as mankind all need to step back and say, hey, wait a minute. I can get my immune system back on its feet again. If I eat right, if I stay away from junk food, if I exercise regularly, if I go out in the sun, I get some fresh air and activate my vitamin D, then I'm protected. And that's where nature protects us. And this is where most people are going, saying, oh, well, I can work late hours, late into the night. I can mess up my melatonin by having lights on and computers on all day and night. And, I can do all of this and nothing's going to happen to me. And then when they get sick, they're asking themselves, why am I sick? Well, you can't eat out 3 days a week, grabbing a sandwich or some sort of a hamburger or whatever it is, pizza every day, eating junk food also, and lots of chocolates and candies and all of this other stuff. You just can't do sugar and have an acidic body and a stressed body and avoid viruses or avoid cancer. It's all in the same boat. It's all the immune system. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I love that you just, laid that foundation, because we know that, we're exposed to viruses, bacteria, molds, fungus, these kinds of things every single day of our lives. And I've talked about this a lot over the years, that it's not that we should be afraid of being exposed to these things, right? We should understand that when you're exposed, and just like cancers, your body DNA is being damaged and cells are breaking down and they're starting to ferment and lead to cancerous cells. It's not the cancer that we're afraid of, it's the environment in which the cells live in our bodies that we need to be concerned about, right? Because any one of us could get exposed to a virus or a bacteria and have 0 symptoms. The past couple of years, for the first time I think ever, asymptomatic was perceived as a bad thing. If you're asymptomatic, it was like vilified, and yet asymptomatic means your body is actually doing what it's designed to do, which is not have symptoms from something because your immune system's handling it the way it's designed to do. But when we are overweight or obese, we have underlying chronic health conditions, we have, damaged our immune system through, as you said, there's too much stress, too much fast food, too many toxins, too much sugar, all these things that put an overburden, I should say, on our immune system. Then you come into contact with something like a viral infection, or your body starts to replicate cancer cells at a faster rate because of these underlying conditions. That's where we see, unfortunate deaths. That's where we see unfortunate hospitalizations. But if we're doing all the things that you're talking about, then at the end of the day, we really have nothing to worry about, right?
Now, the irony is the more you're exposed to all sorts of toxins in the environment and viruses and so on, the better your immune system is. We've seen this in children that were raised in very poor neighborhoods with very poor sanitation. And those kids never got anything. They were healthy as horses. And why? Because their immune systems were active from the early stage on. And if we're exposed to more people that have different viruses and infections, our immune systems learn to deal with it and to fight it off. So that's where that herd immunity comes in, where we know that if the more people that we're exposed to in life that have whatever it is, for it could be a cold or a rhinovirus or influenza virus or whatever it is, the more our immune systems can deal with it, and they're activated and say, nope, you're not getting anywhere in me. I already did that. I eat well, exercise well, I'm out in the sun all the time, and glad you're there. Ha, you don't have a chance. And this is exactly what happens. And it's fantastic because our immune systems they're our lifeline for everything.
So I want to get into some of the, evidence-based natural things that you found have been incredibly effective for supporting the immune system. Before we do, I want to kind of transition a little bit to women's cancer specifically. We know that breast cancer, at least as of now, is the number one cancer that most women face today, right? But what are some of the other major cancers that women are dealing with and maybe women should be concerned about?
Well, I think the ovarian cancers, where we've had problems over the years with hormone replacement therapy, and also with endometrial cancers, the same thing, the same stories. We've seen problems with some papillomaviral infections that can lead to cervical cancer in that particular aspect. So these are things that we need to be aware of. And I think that it's really important for women to know that if there is something abnormal going on, either a strange menstrual cycle or period or something, or after menopause and suddenly bleeding, these are things that people have to be aware of, that it could be an ovarian cancer or a uterine cancer. It could be any one of these. It could just be that their progesterone levels are too low. So these are things that so I'm pushing sweet potatoes. But this is something where I see this with a lot of women that are, how can I put it? The thing is, we're contaminated quite a bit in our environment from water and from Wi-Fi, and the water is full of plastics. Every time I see a woman walking down the street with a thin plastic water bottle that might have been sitting out in the sun for hours or whatever the heck, and the BPAs from those plastics are estrogen mimetics. So basically what we're finding is we're getting more female cancers and exacerbations of male cancers like prostate, which is very similar because it has estrogen receptor activity also, hydroxylating the testosterone. So that messes them up. Lung cancer shows estrogen receptors, male or female, it doesn't matter. And so what we're seeing is these estrogen mimetics. In fact, I have 3 patients. One has prostate cancer. His 2 buddies have prostate hyperplasia. They all play golf, and guess what? They're all drinking all day long on the golf course out of plastic bottles. And so they're getting the estrogen mimetics. And this is something where I tell people you must filter your water. You've got to filter out a lot of these things in the water, because our water, unfortunately, is not as safe as it used to be. And we're getting more and more. The laws, and I was at FDA in toxicology, the laws for water were that you could have so many parts per million of a particular chemical. But when you have this chemical and this chemical and this chemical and this chemical and this chemical, and pretty soon you have a soup kitchen full of chemicals coming out of your tap water. And so this is why it has to be filtered. And some people use different filters. Some people have a house filter. It depends, but the main thing is to make sure that it's checked and that the water is safe, because the children are drinking that. And this is where, when I was my daughter was in kindergarten, and they weren't filtering the water, and I was living in a farm area. Well, guess what? Nitrites everywhere, and all of the pesticides and so on that were leaching down into the water. So I said, we have to filter the water for these children. They only weigh 20 pounds or 25 pounds. And if they're drinking a liter of this every day with all of these chemicals in it, it's cumulative. It's adding up in their little bodies. And so I finally convinced them that they should filter the water when they have drinks for the children in the afternoon of water, and whenever they mix it with apple juice or whatever it was. So they finally listened to me. But as a toxicologist also, I'm appalled at the toxins that are in our foods and in our waters. And this is where where do you begin? And if people are watering their vegetables with a hose, and I was doing this about some time ago, and I remember I'm watering it and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, there's fluoride in this water. there's all sorts of other chemicals in this water. What am I putting in my plants? And I keep thinking, please, I hope they transmutate into something healthy so that I can eat my own vegetables. But these are the problems that we have nowadays in general. Just safe food and safe water. That alone is the basics of our health, the basics. So we deplete everything in our body, or we have all these extra hormones coming in. And I thought, well, Mr. Jones's Viagra and Mrs. Smith's antidepressants combined with Mrs. Miller's hormone replacement therapy, and all of this stuff's getting into the water, and they only have to filter out X amount, and the laws are no bacteria. Okay, so the bacteria has to be under a certain level. But bacteria isn't the only problem in there if you have thousands of chemicals. We figure there's over 6,000 chemicals in the water. And I'm like, what? You're kidding me. And this is where it's just coming in from all over the place. So we have to really, really filter our water and make sure that we do not drink out of soft plastic bottles, that we make sure that our water is filtered and we're not getting those BPA estrogen mimetics. See, that's what one of the big problems is for women. And also, of course, things like aluminum, which they call aluminium over here in London, but it's aluminum, and it's in chemtrails, it's in the water, it's in the rain, it's everywhere. And
deodorant, I remember seeing a study a number of years ago that they took the biopsies of a number of women that had breast cancer. And they actually measured the aluminum levels in the tumor, which if you look at the deodorant that many people use today, men and women, it has some form of aluminum in it, and it's right here in one of the major lymph nodes, one of the major lymph sections in the body when you're putting it in your armpit right there. And they actually measured the amount of aluminum in the tumors, and it was off the charts, so it just goes to show you that aluminum is a very toxic substance we need to be very aware of.
It goes right into the breast tissue. It's amazing. They've actually studied this to see where it goes, and it goes right through the lymph system into the breast tissue. But additionally, it gets into the brain and the pineal gland. And guess what the pineal gland is responsible for? Melatonin.
Yep.
And when the nurses who worked the night shift had the lowest levels of melatonin, they had the highest levels of breast cancer. And so you begin to look at this and you see, wow, if our pineal gland is messed up from aluminum, and we're not detoxing from aluminum and all the other metals, mercury, etc., we're in trouble.
Melatonin is not just, as you know, a hormone for helping you sleep. It's a natural anti-inflammatory, right? And it has other functions in the body. So melatonin is really important when it comes to helping the body to heal from cancer.
Well, I found out that the pineal gland is blocked by fluoride and blocked by aluminum. Wow. And that's our melatonin center. And I was like, you're kidding me. You've got to be kidding. Whenever I find this thing, I'm flabbergasted. And so we do detoxes, and we do combinations of zeolite or spirulina, chlorella, and so on to detox. And we detox for fluoride in the pineal gland with boron, a pinch of natural boron. And that kind of surprised me, but it helps to open up that pineal gland, and we need that. We need it for meditation too, I was told. But I think the people that meditate more than I do, I don't know how they do it. I never have any time. It's terrible. I'm always reading something, and there's always something new, and there's always something that is potential, but I don't jump on potentials until I have proof. I drive myself crazy. It took me years to work with LDN because I didn't have any confirmation. When I finally got the confirmation, I was like, wow, this stuff really works. But before that, it's not fair to tell patients, oh, this can help or this can help, unless you're sure, if you really know and you see the data. And animals are not enough. They help. And like Judith Oakman said, if you were a mouse, I could cure you. And I'm like, well, thanks, Judith. But what about us? What about the humans? What about the rest of us? But this is where you see parallels, and you have to then look at everything. And that's why by looking at the diet, I mean, what do the mice get? They all get the same standard food, right? But what do humans get? Everything. I mean, you name it, whether you're out buying a sandwich someplace on the street or whatever. I swear some of the healthiest people in the world, ironically, are eating from the street in India because they're getting all the bacteria there. And the ones that swim in the Ganges, they don't get sick. And the Ganges is like a cesspool. I mean, it's just awful. Even all the toilets are emptied into the Ganges, and they cremate on the Ganges. And I'm like, what? And the people don't get sick. Why? Here. They believe it, and they're not stressed. As soon as people get stressed, their entire immune system is trashed. And that's why we really need to work on fear, and we need to work on learning to relax. So food, water, diet, emotional, all of these things, it's a composite. It's kind of like a star in many ways. And each point of that star is part of our healing process to keep us healthy or to get us healthy. And that's what I look at. And that's why I try to balance out all of these. This is why, for me, when I have a patient, I'm very often 2 or 3 hours with them to find out, what are you eating? What do you do? How do you relax? Do you have Wi-Fi in your home? Is it on next to you? Is your cell phone on your body? Are you getting electromagnetic fields, et cetera, that are disturbing you? They turn on cancer cells. And I found that out recently, that it's called human endogenous retroviruses. And these are viruses that are normal in our body, in our DNA. And they are awake when we're a fetus and developing. And as soon as that baby's born, they stop, except when you get cancer. And then they're reactivated again. And when it can activate them, Wi-Fi.
So this was sort of, once I discovered the lump and I'd done a bit of reading about mammograms, I was just a bit concerned about getting a mammogram. So in the meantime, before the appointment, I got a thermogram. And the thermogram, it showed the lump as clear as day. On a thermogram, it's more red if you've got more heat. And usually more heat indicates increased angiogenesis or formation of blood cells supplying the tumor. So I had all this red and then this big clear lump. You could see it, but I think I just talked myself out of being concerned about it. I just assumed that it was, I didn't want to believe it, I think. But I had another thermogram, I think it must have been about a year later. And this was after doing loads of sort of detoxification of estrogen. So the overall heat pattern was completely different. All the red had gone, even in the remaining breast, it was all blue. And obviously the lump was gone because it was removed, but the thermogram was much, much better. And then the blood biopsy tests that I got, the first one was the RGCC test. So if I'm trying to remember, I think for breast cancer, if you get less than 5, they say that is either early stage or responding to treatment. So, with a near 6 centimeter tumor, I don't think we could call that early stage. So I just assumed must be responding to treatment. And then the next, because I've more recently been working with a functional doctor, I mentioned the RGCC test, but she said that there's another test that's more validated in the UK called Cancer Track. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but I think it pretty much does the same kind of thing as the RGCC. It's like a tumor cell count. And that was basically as low as it could possibly be. It couldn't be any lower. So that was really good news because that was about sort of 2 years on. And after having been given, what were my, when you asked about prognosis, my last appointment with the surgeon, she kind of looked it up on a computer and she told me that I had a 36% chance of surviving 10 years. But by following this route, I've taken back that control. And of course, you know, the outcome's not completely predictable, but I think when I kind of, through the meditations, I'm kind of programming my body into believing that I'm healed. So that in itself is kind of predicting healing. That's kind of the message that I keep telling my body.
That was part one of my interview with Dr. Flavin. Isn't she amazing? You'll see more from her later in this docuseries. You'll also discover so much more on all of these important issues that Dr. Flavin brought up, including the impact of stress and negative emotions on our health, how to keep your immune system strong, and the vital importance of consuming the right kinds of clean food and water. Speaking of water, that's what our next interview is all about. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. If you're like many people, you likely just turn on the tap when you need a drink of water, or maybe you don't like the taste of your tap water and you're buying cases of bottled water instead. Well, we all know that we can't live without water, but how much consideration are you giving to the water that you're drinking every day? Could poor water actually contribute to cancer? Is there a best water when it comes to preventing chronic diseases like cancer? In this next interview, you'll meet water expert Paul Baratiero. Paul has lectured across the world for over 20 years. Over a decade ago, he set out to educate people on the vast benefits of molecular hydrogen. His message has focused on the critical role of molecular hydrogen to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. His lectures present the true cause problem and solutions through scientific studies. He developed the Eco Hydrogen water system and is the founder of Synergy Science, Inc. Paul works diligently to educate people on how to prevent disease and end suffering. This conversation is so important because water is life. It's part of our everyday. It's part of what we give to ourselves, our children, our grandchildren. In this conversation with Paul, we're focusing on two things. One is what's in your water that could be contributing to cancer, and two is what's missing from your water, and could it be this molecule known as hydrogen that needs to be in it for your body to do what it needs to do, which is heal itself. This is a great interview, and I know you're going to learn a lot.
Paul, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
So you have kind of an incredible backstory of what got you into all this amazing work you now do around hydrogen. You're speaking at conferences, you're talking to doctors, you're working with clinics and practitioners, right? Helping them help more people to reduce suffering and help heal from disease. And so what was it that really got you into this whole journey of hydrogen, and why do most people have no idea about hydrogen?
Great questions. What really got me started is the love of my life. My queen, my wife of 27 years, her name is Jacqueline, and she, for our first 10 years of marriage, was having thyroid issues, anemia, gynecological issues with her menstrual cycle and what have you, all kinds of things going on. And so here I was focused on diabetes and helping individuals with diabetes not have amputations. And I thought, this amazing woman is the most important person to me in my life. And I'm 31 years old and I may lose her, right? This was a pretty serious issue. So I was looking for ways to help her and be able to accommodate and make her life better. And so in that process, I was studying everything possible. And I came across the fact that hydrogen regulates so many different systems in the body. And initially, I looked at water as a delivery vehicle for hydrogen gas into the body. And the first thing that people need to understand is that when their bodies are brand new, like a baby, you have the ability to produce hydrogen. Your body was created, engineered, whatever word you feel comfortable with, but you are supposed to be producing hydrogen in your gut 10 to 12 liters of hydrogen gas per day. That's, farting, flatulence, right? So we're supposed to produce hydrogen, but the problem is, and I'm throwing out this number and I'm being kind because it's actually higher than this, but I would say 97% of the population have gut dysfunction to one level or another. And what does that really mean? It means the bacteria in the gut is out of balance. And if the bacteria is out of balance, then they're functioning on about 30% immune function, which my wife was. And so they're more susceptible to sicknesses. They're more susceptible to issues. They have oxidative stress, inflammation, all kinds of issues going on in the body because honestly, there's a lack of hydrogen. And that's what just blew my mind is when I began to research all the systems in the body that are regulated or modulated by hydrogen gas. It blew my mind, honestly. I was like, what the heck? I've never ever heard of this in medicine. I've never heard of this. And so I began looking at studies, and there were not many at that time. Today, there are over 1,100 studies showing therapeutic effects with over 200 disease models. But that's simply because, again, if people's guts are not functioning, you don't have anaerobic microflora, and you don't have these amazing little bacteria that are within the anaerobic microflora family called hydrogen trophs. And these hydrogen trophs convert fiber and short chain and medium chain fatty acids that are in your food that you're supposed to be eating. If you had a gut that was functioning, you would have these hydrogen trophs, and these hydrogen trophs would convert fiber and fatty acids into hydrogen gas. You'd have hydrogen gas, and you would modulate oxidation and have no problems. But because we have disrupted gut function, we don't have the hydrogen. And so people end up with oxidative stress and inflammation, which is the leading cause of disease. And that's what got me doing what I'm doing.
That's fascinating. So hydrogen trophs that are producing the hydrogen, and the hydrogen has multiple functions in the body, reducing oxidative stress, reducing inflammation, right? Are there other functions that the hydrogen has in the body?
Oh, everything. There's not one single system. Everything from HCl in your stomach, hydrochloric acid is part hydrogen, to ghrelin secretions. When we look at ghrelin, which is a master hormone in the body that goes to the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the brainstem to change plasticity, to modulate right and left brain, and to make sure that the brain is functioning and preventing neurologic issues. When we start looking at circadian rhythms, I'm just telling you, there is no system in the body that hydrogen is not active within. When we start looking at telomere lengths, when we start looking at telomerase, which is a major anti-aging aspect in the body, when we start looking at SIRT1, when we start looking at all kinds of systems from NRF1, NRF2 pathways, all of our antioxidant pathways, you name it, hydrogen is in there. And actually, when you break our body down into the core, it's carbon hydrogen chains. I was just on a peptide summit, and we were talking about peptides, and peptides can't function without hydrogen. And so I was being interviewed, and they were like freaking out, going, holy cow, well, how do we miss this? That peptides can't function. Nothing can function in the body without hydrogen. And that's the problem, is when our gut is disrupted, our entire system is in trouble. And so that's why when we give people hydrogen gas, instantly, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, instantly they start to feel the effects because they're supposed to have it in their body naturally.
So just adding hydrogen gas to the body, you're going to see benefits, but wouldn't the root cause of that be actually creating a healthy gut environment so your body can produce more hydrogen trophs, the bacteria, to help create the hydrogen? And how do those two things go together? Do they complement each other, or do they not?
They do. So I'm not a Band-Aid guy. I hate Band-Aiding in medicine. My entire career of being in the medical industry, I dislike Band-Aiding. And what I mean by Band-Aiding, for those that may not understand the term, is giving someone something they have to take every month or they can't function. I like to fix the source problem. And that's what I've done. So, not that this is a sales program, but when I developed the machine, not only did I create a system that will dissolve hydrogen gas by harvesting it out of water molecules, but then we changed the electrical potential. And what I mean by that is the millivolts, water itself can have a positive electrical potential or a negative electrical potential. If it has a positive electrical potential, it's oxidative. If it has a negative electrical potential, what we call ORP, oxidation reduction potential of a solution, in this case, water, if it's a negative electrical potential, then it's antioxidant. And when it comes to repairing the gut, people are trying to use probiotics. They're trying to use all kinds of things. These are all Band-Aids. Some are better Band-Aids than others. But if you actually want to change the terrain and what we call the microbiome of the gut itself, the fastest way to do this is changing the tissue in the gastrointestinal tract to a negative electrical potential of anywhere negative, but particularly if we get to a negative 300 millivolts to a negative 400 millivolts, we very rapidly change the actual biome and terrain, and we selectively stimulate anaerobic microflora where it's supposed to be in the gut. And so this is one thing that I'm extremely passionate about. And so not only are we giving hydrogen immediately to the people, but as they're drinking the water, they're actually modulating their gut function. They're actually increasing immune function, and they're actually repairing or putting back in place the proper terrain. And when you put the proper terrain in place, the bacteria will come. We don't have to seed things. There's a lot of people teaching that, you have to seed things in the gut. I disagree. The environment has everything you need, positive or negative, and whatever you support, that's what will grow or flourish. And so if we give a negative electrical potential to the lining, the tissue lining of the gastrointestinal tract, then you'll have anaerobic microflora coming in. If we put a positive electrical potential, then we end up with too much aerobic bacteria. And that's the problem with most people. If you have too much aerobic bacteria, now you're craving sugar, carbs, depression, anxiety happens. And it's simply because of the bacteria count in the intestinal tract.
Well, really what it comes down to is we think like, oh, just keep adding more good bacteria in, and that's gonna handle it, right? But the reality is that's not how it works. It's what you're putting in that the bacteria come and form around. Your microflora creates that community based on what's actually going in your body, right? And so you have to change what's going in your body to change your microflora environment.
Well, and those bacteria aren't going to create communities unless the environment is appropriate for them. Yep. So you can throw probiotics at people every day, and that's just what it's going to do. You're going to have to give it to them daily, because if you don't change the terrain, or what we call the microbiome, then the bacteria can't create a home. They can live temporarily and you can have function, but they're not going to create a community and a home and establish themselves with strength so that you actually have immune function. And what we need to understand is 70% of immune function is tied to the gut bacteria. Right. So if we don't have the proper gut bacteria, again, like I said earlier, you're going to be functioning on 30% immune. Yes, you can live, but the problem is you're susceptible to a lot of things, and you don't have to be. Literally, there's a beautiful study, and I didn't just make this number up of a negative 300, negative 400. There was a study in Russia many years ago where they looked at the millivolts in the tissue of the gut, and what they found is negative 300, negative 400 is a perfect number where you get the tissue to that, and boom, the entire microbiome is now suitable. And you will select, as it said in the study, you selectively stimulate anaerobic microflora. I've done some small clinicals before with some individuals that had some pretty serious gut dysfunction, and they were taking antibiotics every day to keep inflammation down so they could work and function. And I said, can you start drinking this water and just tell me when you feel pain in your gut? It was within an hour. Literally, that's how quick we were outperforming an antibiotic in growing good bacteria, because as soon as they felt that pain, what did that tell us? Inflammation was coming because the body's trying to repair itself. And so literally you change the electrical potential in your gut, and the body is like, oh, thank you. We're going to set up a home now in our, and that's the reality. It would be the same if you went and burned down a forest, took all the animals out because you were really nice, and you took all the animals out, then burned the forest down, and then you just put the animals back. They're going to be like, excuse me, I have nowhere to live until all the flora and fauna and all the stuff that regrows that I hide in to hide from each other. Those of us that are eating each other, I'm not comfortable here. I'm just like in this naked forest. It's very similar. I know that's oversimplification, but I hope that helps some people understand that no animal would go back in that forest and live when there's no living plants and things to live in. They're going to wait until it is reforested. The same is true in our gut. We have to build the environment back, and then the bacteria feel comfortable.
Now, what about water that's just like, let's say you're out in nature. One of the best sources of water you could find if you're out in nature would just be like a bubbling spring coming up from the earth, right? Just a fresh spring comes out, hits that sunlight, it's getting oxygenated, rolling over rocks, things like that. It's not filled with, other kinds of amoebas or things like that, right? Because it's coming from underground. That water coming out of like a bubbling spring, for example, is that the negative electrical potential of what you're talking about, and does it already have the perfect amount of hydrogen in it that the body needs?
So, great question. You would have a negative electrical potential in naturally occurring waters at high altitude, for example. You would also have in some places on Earth, like Mount Fuji, you have rivers in India, you have in America, you have Mexico, you have France. There are many naturally occurring waters on the earth that do have hydrogen gas naturally in them. Not all water sources do, and not all water sources have a negative electrical potential, because we've polluted many of the water sources in the world with chemicals and things that will bring that negative electrical potential to a positive electrical potential. But in nature, if we were to find water the way it's supposed to be, we would have that a negative electrical potential, and we would not have a ton of chemicals, right? We wouldn't have all these things that we need to get out of the water. And then we would have hydrogen in some situations. But really, if you and I were living in that environment, we wouldn't need to get our hydrogen from water, because we'd be producing it in our gut. We'd be eating fiber-rich foods because we'd be growing our food, or we'd be eating naturally occurring foods. And when you have that fiber, the body, which we wouldn't have destroyed our gut with all the chemicals that are in our environment today, we would still have our gut intact, and we would still be processing hydrogen, 10 to 12 liters of hydrogen per day. That's what the gut typically would produce in hydrogen volume, is 10 to 12 liters.
That seems like a lot of hydrogen.
Yeah, you fart. You're supposed to fart a lot.
So farting. So everyone thinks farting is a bad thing, but you're saying it's actually a good thing.
Oh, it actually tells you that your gut is functioning. And so, funny enough, some people think they're cool because they don't fart. And I'm like, not so good. That's like saying I'm allergic to a lot of foods, so I'm cool. But no, you're allergic to foods because your gut is not functioning, and you don't fart because your gut is not functioning. I mean, I'm not saying every 2 seconds you should be going around, breaking wind or whatever, but the reality is we should be producing.
So I need you to come and talk to my wife and my kids now, because they're going to have a whole new understanding about me now.
You're going to be like, baby, my gut is working.
My gut is it's healthy, I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Well, and so here's the other thing to think about. What the beautiful part of the story is, so you're producing this hydrogen gas, right? You also produce methane, and there's other gases, could be sulfur. It depends on your diet. But the reality is, we're just talking about hydrogen today. Well, what's really cool about these hydrogen trophs is not only do they convert fiber and fatty acids into hydrogen gas, but they use 30% of the hydrogen gas as their energy source. So they're creating their own food. And then the other 70% of the gas goes into our body and modulates function. And then we breathe it out or fart it out. And that's what we do. I mean, that's what would happen. So you would use part of it in the body, and then part of it's going to go out the tailpipe, and that's what would happen naturally if we had proper gut function.
That was part 1 of my interview with Paul Baratiero. You'll hear more from Paul later in this docuseries. If you're someone who drinks from plastic bottles at all, you'll definitely want to see part 2, so be sure to stay tuned.
And from that, we took the positive points and the points that related to my situation, and we started on 100% vegetarian diet the following week, and we juiced maybe twice a day, and within 2-3 weeks my reflux was gone. So that was the first positive result from a change in lifestyle, which gave us a lot of hope, I suppose, and a lot of reinforcement in that we could help our own health rather than depending on the medical establishment for everything. Now, I will preface that by just saying that I had asked my consultant, what can I do myself to help the situation? And he said, Tom, enjoy your beers and pizza. So that didn't ring true. And the second thing was when I was doing radiotherapy, the nutritionist told us to, if we had upset stomachs after it, to get a big glass of milk. And that didn't, after what I'd read, it didn't make sense to me either. So, after that, I suppose we decided to take responsibility and pursue both the medical side and our personal lifestyle and diet choices, and change the way we lived, really.
Even to this day, it took almost 100 years to figure out that inside lemon, limes, and oranges was something called vitamin C. That was the cure for scurvy, and scurvy that killed millions in a very short time was a deficiency in vitamin C found in citrus fruits. And what they discovered was that each lime, lemon, and orange had 10 milligrams of vitamin C only. Now, to put that in perspective for people, did you know that in a capsule today that you buy at a grocery store or department store or a pharmacy or health food store, do you know that in one capsule of vitamin C, there's 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C in there? Well, all you need is an orange, lemon, or lime, just one with 10 milligrams of vitamin C to actually prevent and cure the world of scurvy. This is no different with cancer worldwide, that it is said kills millions of people worldwide. There are actually nutritional deficiencies that are created that lead to all disease outcomes and symptoms. And as long as you feed the body what it needs and take away from the body what is causing poison, toxicity, or immune suppression, you can cure almost any disease, but you have to change the environment in which your body's physiology and cells live in to change your experience of living. You can either be healthy or you can be sick. You get to choose, but you have to make the choice.
Heart disease and cancer are the #1 and #2 killers in this country and in many countries around the world. It shouldn't come as a surprise that cancer and heart disease actually have many causes in common. Our next expert is renowned cardiologist Dr. Joel Kahn, who is also a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University School of Medicine. Known as America's Healthy Heart Doc, Dr. Kahn. That was part 1 of my interview with Paul Baratiero. You'll hear more from Paul later in this docuseries. If you're someone who drinks from plastic bottles at all, you'll definitely want to see part 2, so be sure to stay tuned. Heart disease and cancer are the #1 and #2 killers in this country and in many countries around the world. It shouldn't come as a surprise that cancer and heart disease actually have many causes in common. Our next expert is renowned cardiologist Dr. Joel Kahn, who is also a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University School of Medicine. Known as America's Healthy Heart Doc, Dr. Kahn has triple board certification in internal medicine, cardiovascular medicine, and interventional cardiology. He was the first physician in the world to certify in metabolic cardiology with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine and the University of South Florida, and is founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity in Michigan. Dr. Kahn has authored scores of publications in his field, including articles and chapters and monographs. He has 6 books in publication and has appeared regularly on Dr. Phil, The Doctor's Show, Dr. Oz, Larry King Now, and even Joe Rogan Experience. Whether you're concerned with preventing heart disease or cancer, I know you'll take away a lot of valuable information from this discussion with Dr. Khan.
You're truly, the expert in this field. I'm really grateful you have taken the time out of your busy schedule to be here and to share with all of our listeners and viewers. Really, this is potentially life-saving information. So thank you. And I want to get right into the first question, which is, obviously, as a cardiologist, you treat primarily heart disease, cardiovascular disease, et cetera, right? And we know that heart disease is the #1 killer in Americans today, and cancer is the #2 killer. And I would assume that a number of your cardiovascular disease patients are also faced with either secondary comorbidities like cancer, or are significantly more prone to a secondary comorbidity like cancer. Is that accurate to assume?
That is accurate. A cardiologist is going to see predominantly people 50 and up. I see people from 18 to 50. It's going to be a little less frequent. And what we know for sure, as we age, both our risk of obvious heart disease and sadly, our risk of cancer both go up. So there's a lot of overlap in my patients with breast cancer, prostate cancer, other, common colorectal cancers, melanoma, of course, and some of the young people have it too, sadly.
And that's, I want to just address something you just said, which is as we age, right, the risk goes up. And that statement alone, while it's true, we know that it can be very misleading for people who don't really understand what's at the heart and the cause of heart disease or cancer, right? And so they think it's heart disease or cancer is just a normal part of aging. You get old and you get sick, it's normal, right? But I'd love to hear your opinion, your perspective on that, because is it just something that happens as you age, or is it due to other lifestyle factors, antecedent factors, for example?
Yeah. Well, of course, there are cancers and heart diseases that involve even infants and children, acute leukemia in children and congenital heart disease. But when we're talking the big numbers, like in 2020, nearly 700,000 people died of cardiovascular disease, heart disease in the United States alone. It's millions worldwide. #2 is cancer in the 600,000 range. And #3 last year was COVID-19, as counted by the CDC and the NIH, with about 300,000 roughly. And most of that we're talking about is aging, epidemiology. You're just going to find more cancers as we age per capita. Is it accumulated bad lifestyle? Is it accumulated toxins and environmental toxins? Is it genetics that just take time to alter our metabolism and lead to enough growth and enough cellular damage to show up as heart disease or cancer? All these are possible. I can't quote you precisely the most recent statistics on the genetic role in cancer, but there was just published a major study in hundreds of thousands of people where they looked at the role of genetics in heart patients in a broad population of clinic patients. It was actually 32% had at least one very important genetic input. So I live by this credo, and you've heard it: the genes load the gun, the lifestyle pulls the trigger. Good genes, good lifestyle, that's good for cancer and heart disease reduction. Bad genes, bad lifestyle, that's a high-risk quadrant to live in. And there's the other 2 quadrants. And if you have some family history, that might be bad genes, and you want to make sure your lifestyle is very good. But this most recent heart study said 32% of heart patients in a broad clinic sample have an important genetic input. So you got to work even harder if you find out about it. And it's easier and easier by saliva and swabs in the cheek and blood to check your genetics if you're so inclined. And if you use it to motivate you, I learned I have a risk for this cancer, that cancer, this heart disease, so I'm going to eat more broccoli, take more walks, sleep better, avoid plastic bottles. I mean, that's how you got to react to it all. And, maybe do a little research on supplements.
That's a good point. We're going to get into a lot more of those contributing factors of both heart disease and cancer, the commonalities, and then what you can do about it for prevention or helping your body heal. And before we do, you mentioned, what is the hereditary impact or the genetic impact of of cancer. Well, cancer.gov states that 5 to 10% of all cancer has a major, heredity has a major play or major role in those cancers. So, that's if we're looking at the genetic makeup specifically. Now, we know that genes don't dictate your destiny, right? We know that if you have a cancer gene, for example, it doesn't mean you're going to have cancer. 50% of women with the BRCA1 gene never ever get cancer, right? So just having the gene alone doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. And I'm assuming, I'm not a heart disease expert, you are, and so I'd like to ask you, but I'm assuming just because you have some of these genes that give you more risk of having a cardiovascular disease, for example, doesn't mean that you're going to have cardiovascular disease. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Or Alzheimer's, dementia, the famous gene called ApoE. I mean, some of the genes that you may inherit a gene from your parents where your cholesterol's 400 from birth, or a genetic cholesterol I have an interest in called lipoprotein A is very elevated from birth. But I have patients in their 60s and 70s who are that combination, and they don't have any heart disease we can detect, and we're doing very advanced testing. I know that analogy is certainly true in cancer. You inherit the risk, but the disease doesn't develop because it usually takes multiple inputs. But if you have a cancer risk in your genes or your family, it'd be unwise to smoke and eat lots of fast food with sweetened beverages. It'd just be unwise to do that.
Absolutely. So I found a study where researchers followed more than 12,000 patients who didn't have heart disease. So those 12,000 patients were without heart disease. They didn't have heart disease or cancer initially. And they followed these 12,000 patients for nearly 15 years. And they discovered that people with risk factors, which made them more likely to develop heart disease over a 10-year period during that 15-year period. So more likely to develop heart disease over 10 years, were 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer during the 15-year study. So just having the risk factors over that 10-year period of heart disease made them 3 times more highly likely to actually be diagnosed with cancer. So the question then becomes, and I know you're aware of this study as well, we talked about it a little bit back and forth previously, what are those risk factors for heart disease that also increase someone's odds of being diagnosed with cancer? 3 times risk of odds.
Yeah, so I mean, some are very obvious. One we mentioned, aging. You will find, age is a very well recognized risk factor for developing heart disease, like a heart attack. You can be 32 and have a heart attack. You're much more likely to be 72. Smoking increases the risk of many cancers, increases the risk of heart disease. There's a shared, risk there. Eating lots of processed red meats, bacon, hot dog, pepperoni, sausage, major increase in colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, but also clearly drive your saturated fat content, your cholesterol up, and your risk of developing clogged artery, stroke, and heart attack and early death. Shared. Diabetes, many cancer rates are higher in diabetics, and we know developing clogged arteries is higher in diabetics. And we can go on and on. Air pollution is actually, or even living near factories, living near trucking industries, working in a trucking industry, being around unclean air, which is a big concern. May sound like it's, woo or global warming issues. The science is incredibly strong, and it's a shared risk of this particulate debris against lung cancer, ear, nose, and throat cancers, oral airway cancers, and high blood pressure and heart disease. So there's just a lot of shared origins. I mean, broccoli is a response to heart disease and cancer, and there's a lot of shared solutions too. But that's why the study you mentioned, more women with breast cancer die of heart disease than die of breast cancer, because it's just more common. There is a shared risk that can go in from lifestyles that we might say are not optimal for disease prevention. Poor sleep, risk for working a night shift with poor sleep, risk for breast cancer, risk for other cancers, risk for heart disease. So a lot of shared roots.
So it obviously sounds like for people who want to prevent cancer, it also makes sense that the lifestyle behaviors for preventing heart disease will also help them prevent cancer, right? And since that's the case, by preventing one disease, we can improve our odds of preventing another. So what are those lifestyle habits? You talked about some of the risks, but let's talk about the habits. Let's talk about the solutions that will help people prevent heart disease and at the same time will help prevent cancer altogether.
Right. So from the field of cardiac disease, let me just flesh out just a little bit more of these commonalities. There actually is a specialty that's arisen in the last, let's say, 15 years. And it's a formal specialty now called cardio-oncology, heart cancer. And if you look up Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, University of Michigan, Johns Hopkins University, you'll see divisions of cardio-oncology. You'll see conferences, you'll see journals. These are really expanded in the last 5 years, particularly. You can get certified. I've been through that process. Why? Because one, long-term survivors of cancer need to stay focused on heart disease, just the statistics we've reviewed. Two, some of the treatments, and the most common one mentioned would be breast cancer. The chemotherapy itself, depending on what's given, can damage the heart, lead to congestive heart failure and other very serious cardiac problems. The radiation that a woman might get, particularly over the left breast, could lead to long-term irritation in heart arteries and a higher risk, and many other overlaps too. So there is this, recognition that it's important. But speaking about cardiology, particularly heart disease, to your listeners, I mean, we know the majority of the causes of heart disease. In the 1960s, we identified famous studies called Framingham Heart Study and others. If you're a smoker, if you're diagnosed as a diabetic, diagnosed with high blood pressure, which means you have to check your blood pressure, diagnosed with high cholesterol, and if you got mom, dad, brother, sister with early heart attack, early bypass, early death from heart disease, you are at increased risk. Risk means it's not a guarantee you're going to get the disease. People do everything wrong and seem to have good longevity, and people do everything right and tragedy happens. But, the same reason you wear a seatbelt and you don't text and drive, on a busy street is you want to lower your risk. So you don't want to smoke, and you do want to know what your blood sugar, blood pressure, blood cholesterol, and a bit about your family history, and you want to work to lower that risk for sure. But we now know you can go way beyond that. I mentioned one thing, I'll mention two things. You should know if your body has excess inflammation or not. Could be your bad dental health, could be your waistline, could be your diet, could be your sleep patterns, could be your psoriasis. You should ask your doctor for two blood tests, one for inflammation called a high sensitivity C-reactive protein. People with elevated numbers need to try and dig down in sort of a functional medicine model, root cause model. Why do I have elevated inflammation? Do I ever get omega-3 rich foods like chia, flax, hemp? If you eat salmon and sardines in your diet, or are you avoiding all those? Why do you have inflammation? Last time you've been to the dentist and brush your teeth and floss and water pick and all the rest. The other blood test is called lipoprotein A, and that's a big word, L-I-P-O protein, then lowercase a. It's a genetic cholesterol that affects 20 to 25% of all people from birth, causes arteries and valves to clog up, may cause 1 out of every 7 heart valve replacements of the aortic valve, but less than 1% of doctors check it in patients in the office. In my office, it's 100%, and it's been that way for over a decade because we've known of this cholesterol particle, totally different than the usual cholesterol. Now, right now, pharmaceutical companies have no solution for this genetic cholesterol, which is why you don't hear about it, but they are working on it right now, the big boys of Novartis and Amgen. So you're going to be reading about lipoprotein A, but go ask your doctor on the next visit. Do all your blood work, add a high sensitivity C-reactive protein. I want to know if I'm inflamed or not. And add a lipoprotein A. I want to know if I'm one of the 25% that inherited it. And the last thing I'd recommend, and I'm done, is early detection. We go for mammography, we go for colonoscopy or Cologuard, we get a digital rectal exam, we get pelvic exams. The dentist looks in our mouth for oral cancers. What the heck do you do for your heart that kills almost 700,000 people a year in the United States? Yeah, you get a blood pressure and maybe you get your cholesterol level. That doesn't compare to colonoscopy and mammography. So there is a CT scan. You might want to do once in your life, maybe twice. If you come from a scary background, maybe around age 45, otherwise 50, 55. It's called a heart calcium CT scan. It takes about 5 seconds. You hold your breath, you go home, no injection, no IV, no exercise. You can't be allergic to it. Used to be over $1,000 when it was discovered 30 years ago. Now it's about $75. If you're lucky to be listening from Cleveland, the University Hospital in Cleveland does it for free, actually. And you always have to be careful about volunteering for CT scans, because CT equals radiation equals cancer. But with this darn high heart disease risk, it's a very low radiation CT scan. You only have it once, perhaps. And you want to know if your coronary artery calcium score is 0, which is the big winner, or is 1,400 or 2,200, meaning you're really in trouble and we need a real program. So if we were a little more aggressive, I use a hashtag test, not guess. And believe me, you're seeing a doctor in a medical system that usually guesses about your presence of heart disease if you've never had a heart attack, stroke. We don't guess about colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, uterine cancer. We test for it. And we need to adopt a more aggressive strategy for the #1 killer of men and women. So that's what I would recommend to people. It's actually a pretty simple, I did a consult this morning with a woman and, we talked for an hour. I said, look, you only need 2 things. And I told you those 2 things right at the beginning: a few extra labs and a very simple CT scan at your local hospital. Costs you $75. And if somebody is watching, I'm going to fill out her prescriptions in a minute. And actually, I made sure her husband gets one too. CT calcium scoring without contrast, or a heart artery calcium scan. But every hospital of medium or large size offers this in every city in the United States.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We talk a lot about this for people with cancer or trying to prevent cancer, is to test, right? Because you want to know if you're nutrient deficient, if you have high C-reactive protein levels, if you do have more prone genetics for cancer. All these things are important to understand, right? How's your gut handling your diet? Are you having chronic inflammation from an autoimmune disorder because of a food that is creating leaky gut, for example? Like, all these things you want to test. My concern is if people tuning in go to their regular cardiologist who doesn't know anything like you do, and like we're going to talk about diet, about nutrition, about natural, holistic, or effective alternative solutions for helping the body heal. And they come back with high C-reactive protein levels, and they come back with a positive lipoprotein A result or something along those lines. And that doctor just says, oh, we got to get you on anti-inflammatories right now. We got to get you on this drug, that drug, this drug, that drug, right? What would you say to people who may encounter that experience with their conventional cardiologist?
Yeah. And actually, it's a good point, because even though this heart calcium CT scan has been available for 30 years, even though the lipoprotein A blood test has been available for decades, as well as the high sensitivity C-reactive protein, all of them having thousands of research papers behind them. Despite all that, your family doc may well say, I've never ordered one, never heard one, you don't need one. They may actively discourage you. And to get the blood work, you can order on your own. The CT scan usually requires, except in a couple places, state of Texas and I think Indiana, you usually do need your doc to write your prescription. So it can be a bit of a hassle. That's what I do full time, but I can't handle, all the people in the United States. And so you do want to become Dr. Google a bit. You want to read, just put my name in high sensitivity C-reactive protein, or the famous Harvard professor Paul Ridker really gets the credit, RIDKER, who patented the test 20 years ago. I have a book sitting on my desk here called Dead Execs Don't Get Bonuses. Very simple, easy read why getting this test is of so much importance. But believe me, anytime you step out of the norm, you've just caused your doctor to spend 1 extra minute looking at the lab, looking at the test, discussing it with you. Not always popular. And if you know more than they do, man or woman, doesn't matter, you also put them in an awkward position. So, you want to be humble and kind, but persistent, and get the extra studies done. Test, not guess.
I think health insurance has destroyed our healthcare systems in America. I think it has stripped the rights of medical professionals and healthcare professionals in every single sphere from being able to honestly and ethically practice medicine and healthcare with their patients. I think that's one. Health insurance, I think, has been a huge problem. Number two has been the specializing of medicine. I think when the medical profession decided to isolate various organ systems and only look at one organ as a part of the human body is a massive problem. The entire body is a system, and I think the entire body should be looked at by every healthcare professional as a whole. And I think that has been a huge problem in the world of medicine. It actually has left more mystery, more complexities, and worse outcomes for patients isolated and isolating them to see a specialist to only talk about your eyes or to talk about your kidneys or to talk about your lungs or your heart or your bladder or your ovaries, and not educating the patients on a whole, or the professionals actually, how the whole body and the whole system works as a whole.
Well, as far as how it was before, spread too thin, and gratefully I was very busy. I got to work with a lot of special people, and get to do a lot of work connected to what was then my purpose. And I say that for a reason. But it was too much. And that caregiver in me with the word no, wasn't fully, the no wasn't there. So I would spend a lot of hours, too many of my week, really focused on other people and neglecting myself. And actually, and as a business owner, I was quite stressed and just running myself to the ground, probably. I did. And then once the elements of my partner's health, and then my dear friend, and then my mother, and then COVID, it just took it to this next level, like a point of no return. So my life before was the classic stressed out, spread too thin, overgiving, self-neglecting, breast cancer archetype woman. I know men get it too, but I know it's okay. So as God works, the divine works, I was forced, like I said earlier, to take care of myself. So the way my life looks now, and is I'm saying no. It's still a struggle to do that, but I'm here. I'm talking to you all. In the past, I probably wouldn't have, you know what I mean? It felt like I could fit that in. And then two, it's a new sense of purpose and better ways to spend my time. You know what I mean? So caring for myself more. I've created a lot of time to do that, even if it's creating stress in other ways. I love nature. I'm outside. I'm in the wild violets. I'm making a lot of plant medicine. I've started my own little botanicals business too. You know what I mean? It's pivoted me in this whole other direction where my time isn't completely focused on other people. And I'm taking better care of myself. My life is much better. And I really mean that. And I'm grateful for cancer.
This was part one of my interview with Dr. Khan. You'll hear his prescription for an anti-cancer and anti-heart disease diet in an upcoming episode, so make sure to stay tuned. Our next interview is with Jason Prahl. Jason is a close friend and fellow health researcher and documentarian who has been studying the true nature of chronic disease, which of course includes cancer. In 2018, his independent research and experience led him to create the Human Longevity Project, a 9-part film series that uncovers the true nature of chronic disease in our modern world. He's working on a book and his next film series that explores ancient methods of healing mind, body, and spirit from indigenous cultures around the world. In this interview, Jason shares the key takeaways that he's gleaned from his years of research into how to live a long, healthy life. It's not theoretical knowledge from textbooks and doctors, but from the actual people who've done it.
So you're just coming off this recent event, Waking the Healer Within. I know you interviewed, well over 30 global leaders in health and transformation. I know the primary focus of the event is really to focus on helping people reveal what actually keeps people stuck with chronic illness and how to break free of symptoms and disease. You talk a lot about this kind of hamster wheel, this roller coaster ride that people go through, trying new things, and not really getting anywhere, staying very stuck, right? And your whole event, and a lot of the work you're doing is really focused on helping people get to that root cause. And that's what we need to focus on with any chronic disease, specifically cancers. What are those root causes, right? So if you were to break down some of the core causes that you've discovered that really keeps people stuck with chronic illnesses like cancer, what would those causes look like?
Yeah, well, I think there's really just one, and it's living out of alignment. And so we can, of course, drill down on that quite a bit. But when we're living out of alignment, then the healer within, as I like to say, it's not going to be optimized. It's not going to be ignited to its full capacity, right? So we need to be living in alignment with the greater whole. In other words, there's universal concepts, universal aspects of human health that we all must abide by, right? Like we all need sleep, and we need good restorative sleep, right? So that's a good one to focus on when you have any chronic disease, especially cancer. How can we optimize sleep, right? So that is a really, really important one. The other one is we need connection. We need loving relationships, right? Of course, we need to drink water and food and these type of things. So if the water and the food that you're consuming is not in alignment with human health, and particularly your health, your constitution, right? So we're all different beings. And so this is why we're all searching for the right diet for us, right? And there's a couple maps that we can follow. Ayurveda's got a fantastic map that we can follow. Chinese medicine has some maps. Some of the newer maps are still kind of working their way through. I wouldn't say they're optimized, but look, vegetarian, vegan diets, fantastic for some people. For other people, not as optimal. So they have to maybe think about things in a different way, right? So, and even amongst, like if you're a vegetarian, there's certain ways to be a vegetarian, right? Certain things are better for you than they would be for me, and vice versa. So the living in alignment with our constitution, I think, is a really, really important concept, right? An easy one is I'm very light skinned, so I can't go out in the sun for too long, or it's going to cause DNA damage, right? The UV rays will cause DNA damage if I'm out there too long. And yet I still need to go out there, right? Somebody with really, really dark skin, they need to be out there longer than I do. And not only that, they can tolerate it, right? So we all have these aspects. The other component to that is, where are we in our timeline? An 8-year-old is going to behave and should behave differently than a 40-year-old, than a 92-year-old, right? We eat differently, we sleep differently, we act differently. So there's a lot to consider, but who are you? What's your constitution? In other words, what are your genetics, right? And what is your disease process that you're going through? We've got to honor that as well. And so there's all these things to consider. And I think a big one too that I kind of mentioned with regard to sleep is circadian rhythm, the rhythm of the day. This is a universal concept that we all really do need to align with, right? We know that shift workers and people that work night hours, they have every chronic disease is a higher risk factor, right? They actually live a shorter lifespan. So these are the things that we want to consider when we're trying to optimize our health or resolve or reverse any chronic disease.
Let's talk about that for a second, because it opens a big can of worms, especially when we talk about diet and sleep and constitution, these kinds of things, because some people say, well, I'm a night owl, right? Mm-hmm. And there's even a book written about people's sleep times, and I should go to bed at midnight or 1 a.m. to optimize my sleep, right? And so people read that or hear that and go, oh yeah, I'm a night owl. So they justify what we might consider otherwise a damaging health behavior, right? Which is go to bed at 1 a.m., maybe wake up at 7 or 8 or 9, right? And And yet, if you look at all the research, and as you just said, if you look at people who stay up late or people who work through the night and sleep through the day, the research is very clear. Doesn't matter their blood type, doesn't matter where they live in the world. If your sleep is out of harmony with the circadian rhythm of the planet that we live on, the sun goes up, it goes down, the moon goes up, goes down, we have cycles, the earth spinning, all these things, right? If you're out of alignment with that, it really doesn't matter. We see a significant increase in all of these comorbidities. So
that's just it. And I want to follow up on what you just said, because we can do so many things right? And if we're getting a couple things really, really wrong or really off, then all those amazing things that we're doing aren't going to work as well. And so it really is kind of like a puzzle. Like once we get enough pieces in place, then we can see the full picture. And that's really what we're looking for. So if we're taking the most amazing supplements, and we're getting acupuncture, and we're doing meditation, and we're doing qigong, and we're working on we have good loving relationships, but we're sleeping horribly, and we're eating at the wrong time of day, for example, then all those amazing things are still going to be amazing, but they're not going to be as effective, right? And so that's a really important concept, is to look at your life and say, where are the big pieces that I'm missing? Or what's off here in the biggest way? In other words, what's the biggest lever that I can pull? And that's really where you want to focus, because it really will make everything else work so much better.
Yeah, I think a lot of those levers that we tend to focus on are the physical, which are important. Diet and nutrition, right? Supplements. Sleep is a big one that a lot more people are focusing on now, which is great, including myself. I used to, years ago, I was like, oh yeah, I can stay up all night, work 24 hours nonstop, 48 hours nonstop without sleep, right? And I realized that was damaging me mentally, physically, emotionally, and started making sleep a priority. I know that's at the forefront of so many people's, health and healing strategies now, taking it a lot more seriously. If you're not, you should be. Who's ever tuning in, I highly recommend it, because you feel better, you have more energy, your body heals, right? All these kinds of things. But we tend to forget about the intangible things, right? We tend to forget about the energetic level of things. We've talked a lot about emotions, emotional healing, and overcoming trauma in this series. I want to make sure people tune into all that, and we can touch on some of that today as well. But I know Awaken the Healer Within, you're really addressing at a deeper energetic level, right? Not only a mitochondrial level, but literally a bioenergetic level as well, when you're talking to Qigong masters and you're talking to energy healers. And, we now have the science that proves these things to be safe and effective, right? But we've had thousands of years of understanding and practice and implementation of these things that people have used through these traditions. You mentioned traditional Chinese medicine and ancient Qigong and Ayurvedic medicine and yogic, practices, right? So can you talk a little bit about that and how it's relative to somebody whose interest is either wanting to stay cancer-free, never have a cancer diagnosis, or somebody who has cancer and they're looking for that next thing that can help them?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we all have patterns of thinking, patterns of belief, patterns of emotion, and patterns of behavior, right? And so many of these are unconscious or subconscious. And so there's a reason for that, right? That we create these patterns out of safety. And so if we're not aware of what these patterns are, then they can literally run our lives. And so the thing that you can look at in your own life is, what are these patterns that I'm running, and why are they being ran, right? Why we all do things that we go, man, why am I doing that? Like, I shouldn't be doing that, right? And we're constantly sort of criticizing or judging ourselves because we know what to do sometimes, and we don't do it. Why? There's something going on energetically in your system. And I don't mean, again, this is the intangible energy. This is something going on energetically that is creating these programs, so to speak. And so there's a lot to do when it comes to rewriting those programs. And we can rewire our nervous system. We can do so many things, right? But an example I always love to point to is, if you were asked to go give a speech on stage in front of 500 people, what would happen? Most likely your heart would start racing. You might start sweating. You might get either beet red or completely, white. I mean, your whole physiology changes. You might stutter. You might not be able to think so well. You might talk really, really fast because you're so what's going on there, right? There's subconscious programs running in the background that signaling your body this isn't safe. Your entire physiology is changing. So that's the stressed out mode because we're in danger. Many of us are operating that way. Pretty much all of us are operating that way to some degree or another throughout our days. When we get that email, when we watch that news clip, when something quote unquote bad happens, this activates our system. And even when things are normal, let's say, we're still activated to some degree because that's the level of dysregulation in our nervous system that essentially comes from childhood conditioning, childhood trauma, but it doesn't have to be so overt. It doesn't have to be like this abusive situation as a child. It can be conditioning. It was that you didn't get the right attention, the consistent love and attunement and nurturing, in particularly in developmental stages. And so we develop these personalities, these little structures and ideas and ways to go about the world to find safety. And we carry those into adulthood, and that's literally running in the background, our physiology. So that is really what we need to think about as an opportunity as adults now to rewrite those programs and operate from a different perspective, a different place. We can upgrade the software, right? And when we upgrade the software, everything starts to work better, right? Your liver works better, your immune system functions better. And this is on a regular basis. And the cool thing is that as we sort of process these ruptures or wounds, so to speak, or traumas, we literally become more whole. We actually become a more integrated being. And more of us can actually be here in rest, relaxed and not stressed. So that when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you have literally no reaction. I don't mean that you don't like actually yell, but your system doesn't actually even really acknowledge it, right? So this is what I think to me is the most exciting aspect of healing, which is how do I get to that level and address these things going on energetically so that I can remain neutral, balanced, centered, aligned with myself, no matter what's going on. How do I get emotionally so tuned in so that not only am I not getting rocked by things, but also I can provide that level of love, care, support, nurturing for others, and also perhaps more importantly for myself, right? And when it comes to cancer, when it comes to any chronic disease, we will, that is such medicine. That is such medicine when we can give that love to ourselves, not from the mental perspective, but energetically, emotionally. It just is what we recognize as who we are, right? So that's a deep, deep level of cultivation that can happen. We don't need it to happen. It doesn't have to happen in order to avoid cancer or to recover from cancer, but it is an opportunity that will inevitably help us recover from cancer. And I say that because as we do more of that work, of the emotional trauma, ruptures, wounds, childhood stuff, that will allow us to be more in tune. It will allow us to be able to be in better alignment. That way I don't have to force my way around the world. I have willpower to make sure I stick to this diet, right? Or I'm trying really, really hard to execute all these healthy things. It just naturally becomes part of your routine, part of who you are, because there's a deep level of care and nurturance in your own system. And there's something in you that recognizes the value of doing this thing here and avoiding that thing over there. So everything starts to come online and everything gets easier. Again, this relates not just to the energetics, but it actually is an outward expression in our behavior, so that we decide that we want to exercise because we know it's good for us. I don't have to force myself to meditate. I just understand and I feel it, that it's really, really doing some good work to my system. And it's not because I want to heal cancer that I meditate. I want to meditate because it's loving and nurturing to my system. And the result is, sure, cancer diagnosis is likely to go away eventually, right? Like these are the things, the desires, the intentions, the objectives start to shift from how do I find safety in this world to I'm already safe. It's a recognition internally that starts to happen as you do some of this cultivation. And again, this can be through yoga, through really, really good mind-body practice of yoga, qigong, tai chi, meditation. There's family constellation therapies and internal family systems and all these different kind of therapy aspects that we can utilize energetically beyond just the talk therapy. We can do hypnotherapy. There's so many cool things that we get to explore, but we need, in order to do that, we must open our awareness to the reality that there's a lot going on at that level, even if I don't recognize what it is yet.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I had a really fascinating conversation with Dr. Bruce Lipton, a good friend of mine, who's in this series where we go into the science of literally everything you just talked about and how to reprogram and change our subconscious beliefs that are sabotaging us and transform them to help us heal, right? To help us heal those traumatic experiences, those negative belief systems, those, sabotaging subconscious program belief systems that we may not even be aware of are running this software you're talking about, running in the background of our lives, that are preventing us from healing, or that are preventing us from being happy, or preventing us from living a life of purpose and meaning and passion, right? I went through a lot of that healing over the last 15 years in my own life, and it's by doing this work that you're talking about and staying committed to it and trusting the process. You don't always see the result immediately, but you get little glimpses, you get little feelings of, like you said, you know what, this feels good, this feels right, I'm going to keep doing it. That meditation practice, I feel better, more peaceful, okay? Even if I don't fully understand what's going on, even if I don't fully understand that, I'm upregulating my immune system by activating my parasympathetic nervous system, by kicking on NK killer cells and T cells and B cells that are eliminating cancer cells. Even if I don't understand all the scientific stuff, what's actually happening, I just tune into my body and go, oh, you know what, this feels good, and it feels like I should be doing this more often. And you listen to that and do it. What ends up happening over time is things that you never thought you would ever heal or address or need to focus on come to the forefront and transform themselves, right? And we see this a lot. I worked with, Ming Tong Gu is a master Qigong teacher, right? He was in your series. He's a good friend of mine, somebody I worked with for a few years at his retreat center, helping on their executive team. And I've been to one of his week-long retreats, and people who go to retreats, they go there to heal cancer, heal chronic back pain, heal Parkinson's disease. And oftentimes they leave and go, I just transformed 5 other areas of my life that I didn't even know I was going to be, that I was going to focus on or heal from. And now I'm more free and happy and loving and kind, to myself. I forgave myself, all these things that happened that they weren't expecting. And then sometimes the disease goes away by itself later on, right? And it's being open to all of those possibilities.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And if we can at least just consider that there's these programs going on in the background, consider how much of your life force energy that is required to keep running those programs, right? It's like a computer that's bogged down, or a phone that has too many apps open, right? We've got to close some of those apps. And when we do, we're going to save the battery. Like, we're not going to run the program so hard, and it's not going to need to be defragged and just operate like a mess, right? So there's a lot going on there. And again, so once we clean that up, we're literally freeing up that vital force energy that we have within us. Again, the reason I called my series Awaken the Healer Within is to recognize that there is already a healer there. Right. You don't need to go do anything or get anything, or you don't actually even need to take any supplements, none of that stuff, right? I mean, this is kind of the essence of Qigong, which is like, no, the energy's here. You have the opportunity to cultivate it. And that's all that's required. And all the stuff that we're relying on externally can start to drop away, right? So it's just the recognition that that's the truth. If I'm willing to accept it, the journey to that truth may take a long time, or maybe quick, right? We don't know, but that's the process. And so there's so much there. And of course, we're not going to know what's there. It's a big dark cave until we go exploring inside and turning on some of the lights. Then we recognize, oh my God, right? You've seen this at your Qigong retreats. I know it. I've seen it in ayahuasca. I've seen it in therapy, energetic therapies, all kinds of different modalities. We go in with one expectation or one objective and one idea of what needs to be addressed. Right. And sometimes we're correct. Like, there's things that we are aware of, and that's great. And what comes on the other side is like, oh my God, I had no idea that that's what was going on. And then once that gets illuminated in your entire being, it's not just a mental thing. You actually understand it from the direct experience, then it all starts to make so much sense. Of course, that's why I'm so I get so fiery. I get so aggressive when certain things happen. That's why I'm calm and then I blow up and I lose it. Or that's why I always back out or I can't follow through. You start to recognize there's these aspects in your system that are creating these patterns of thought, of belief, right? If you can open up your belief that you can heal instantaneously, even with cancer, there's important medicine just in changing that belief. So we can upgrade our beliefs. We can upgrade our thought streams once we become aware of them. And we can actually do this consciously. I know people talk a lot about the subconscious, and yes, it's kind of, it's the elephant that the monkey's riding on, right? There's a lot there. It's the iceberg, but consciously we can do a lot. And so we can bring more awareness from a conscious perspective as we're starting some of this process, as well as get to the unconscious stuff. And so these are the things that we have the power to regulate in our system. And so some of this is why it's more effective and it's easier when we do things like meditate, when we do things like Qigong, and we start to slow everything down because our world is running at hyperspeed. And so again, this actually argues for sleep too. The research is abundantly clear that when we get deep restorative sleep, and we can call it 7 hours, it's give or take, it's about what we need, we make better decisions. We eat better food. We don't binge. We don't drink alcohol as much. We're kinder to others and to ourselves. And if we're not kind to others, then that's a perfect mirror of what's really going on internally, that we're not kind to ourselves. So again, there's so much there to just start with the basics. And again, sleep, meditation, slowing things down, Qigong, yoga, all of this stuff is fantastic to start to bring in. And I love what you said, even if you have no clue what's going to happen or where it's leading you, if you can just a little bit trust the process and stick with it. And with a little bit of curiosity, that's where I think we can invite in this kind of more playful nature to some of this, and less of the rigidity and the structure and the seriousness. And so it's bringing in a little bit of levity, bringing in a little curiosity. What's this going to do for me, right? And then what's revealed is actually the fun stuff. And it's ultimately, like I said, as we start to shift those programs, there's medicine in that. That's where the real medicine is.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I'm reminded of a study that was done. I mean, just talking about shifting mindsets around looking at, cancer, for example, or any challenge you have in your life, where they had two different groups of people, and they had one group basically look at this an experience that they were going to go through as a challenge, as something to overcome, right? Like I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to, do this thing or that thing, whatever it is, as a challenge, versus someone looking at it as a danger, right? And then they had a control group that basically didn't look at it either way. They just looked at it. And they were measuring, I don't remember the control group, actually what they had, but what really significantly stuck out to me was these two groups was the challenge. When they had looked at it as like a challenge, something to embrace, to overcome, to experience, when they look at the neurochemicals that are released in the brain, it's the same chemicals of excitement. It's the same chemicals of that come with joy, that come with laughter, the same chemicals that upregulate your immune system, same chemicals that give you energy and want, help you to move forward in life in a meaningful and happy way, right? It's like, oh, this is a challenge. Yeah, it's something that I want to do. It's exciting. It's right. And then they looked at, the people who looked at it as a danger, like this is a threat, right? You could clearly understand what's going to be happening there, fight or flight. You're activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is literally downregulating your immune system, right? And so the people who looked at it as a challenge to overcome, they did significantly better, which you would imagine, than the people who looked at it as a threat or a danger or a problem that's affecting me, that's taking me, that's killing me, that's destroying me, right? And it's the same way we could look at cancer as it's something that can be an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity. A challenge and an opportunity can be really similar things, right? An opportunity to grow, to heal, to improve, right? And even so, one is shifting your mindset around things that's attacking me, destroying me, trying to kill me, to this is an opportunity, an opportunity to grow, to learn, to improve. But even beyond that, I think we can go to the science of heart math, right? Which I know you know a lot about, which is literally just if you put your hand on your heart and you breathe deeply into your body and into your heart, and you connect to emotions that are even more powerful than challenge or opportunity. You connect to emotions of forgiveness or kindness or love, compassion, and you can do that with yourself, with your cancer, with your family, anything in your mind, and you feel that. We see HRV go up, right? Heart rate variability. We see the healing mechanisms activated, right? Telomeres lengthen. We see all these incredible things that contribute to longevity, healing of disease, activating the immune system response, right? Activating NK killer cells to go and attack and kill and destroy and remove the cancer cells. So just shifting the mindset alone, I think, is over half the battle. Right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is because I think so much discussion is around the subconscious and these automatic programs that are running in the background and how important those are in terms of our understanding and the physiology and what's going to ultimately occur downstream. Sometimes we forget that happiness is a practice, that joy is a practice, right? There's things dictating these things automatically going on in the background, but we actually have an opportunity each day to start to practice some of these things, to start to practice forgiveness, to practice being kind to ourselves, to practice looking at the world with fresh eyes and being in awe of life. This can be a practice that it's a very real thing. We understand the neuroscience now. We're actually rewriting those neural programs. We're rewiring our system to operate from a different perspective. And so, sure, at first, it might be a little challenging. I might have to write down everything I'm grateful for. And then eventually that practice gets to be easier. And then we can start walking through our day. And when I'm at the checkout counter at the grocery store and I'm swiping my card or I'm handing over some cash, I can, in that moment, feel grateful that I have money to be able to buy food and nourish myself, right? We can practice this stuff in every moment of our lives. Right here, right now, you could be watching this going, thank God I found this content that Nathan's putting together. I really feel like this is going to change my life, right? We can practice these things. And so we're so conditioned, right? This is, again, we talk about trauma and things. Sometimes we don't talk enough about the conditioning. One condition that people, especially in the West, that are really ingrained is you have to work hard to be successful. Right? And even with health, this is why I titled my summit "Awaken the Healer Within," is to try to break free of that conditioning that you got to do so much in order to be healthy. It feels like that, and there's a truth to that, right? There are things that are there to do, so to speak, but the healer is about being, and so we really have an opportunity to look at the conditioning that we are all under, and this is literally, we are programmed. As infants, as young ones, by our parents, by our siblings, by our coaches and our teachers, by society at large, by the news media. You have to do this to do that. The only way to be happy is this. There's so much conditioning that really regulates those automatic thoughts. So how can we look at our conditioning with love and curiosity? And also, how do we practice new ways of being and really set the conditioning for those? So these are just opportunities that we all have. And some people really, really need to have a big opportunity to change their thinking. Some have a really, really big opportunity to change their beliefs, right? And so it's an interesting thing when you start examining your own beliefs. You start to really recognize, like, whoa, that's not even mine. That was somebody else's that I've just been adopting my whole life. And I believe this certain thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be true.
Wow. Did you catch what Jason said about thoughts we've had our entire lives that we've just accepted, but that might not actually be our own? We've just absorbed them. And it's that these false thoughts can be creating disease or keeping us stuck in disease processes. This is such a powerful concept that we'll be exploring more deeply throughout this docuseries. The thoughts and thinking patterns that can create cancer and keep you from recovering. I'd be willing to bet that these are concepts you're not hearing from your conventional oncologist. But as you listen to the upcoming stories from forward-thinking doctors and cancer conquerors, you'll see just how important this missing link is to both preventing and healing from cancer. And right now, please do everyone you know a favor and share this series online. And then take a look at the ownership packages on this page and take advantage of the limited time discount we've put together for you. By owning this series, you're going to gain confidence and learn real solutions for preventing and helping your body heal from cancer. And our team here wants to thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being committed to your health and for sharing this with others. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Be well, and I'll see you soon.
There were two lumps on my left breast, and one sort of in the middle upper quadrant was 14 millimeters, and there was another in the upper outer quadrant which was 9 millimeters. And then about 3 months later, in another MRI scan, they also discovered an area of DCIS. I can't remember what that stands for, but it's precancerous. So I had these two lumps, and I think I remember going to see the surgeon in April 2022, and already she couldn't feel the lump, that one particular one. So that seemed to go down very quickly. And then the other lump was 9 millimeters, and that when I had a scan, they didn't scan me for a couple of years actually after I was diagnosed, partly because I was doing my own thing, and they were saying, well, you know, we don't sort of look after you in the same way. But then I did have a scan last March, and the 9 millimeter lump was now 7 millimeters. And I had a scan, my last scan was in November, and that lump had gone to 5.5. So basically they can't see one, and the other one has shrunk from 9 to 5 millimeters. I mean, people talk about the war on cancer, but for me, cancer is a teacher. I don't view it as an enemy, I view it as a teacher. And it's teaching me, or, you know, graphically showing me, you've been out of balance in whatever way. Now you need to do something about it, because if you don't, it could get serious. So I'm viewing it as a gentle teacher at the moment, and I hope it doesn't become a severe teacher. You know, and that's happened so far. It's been a gentle teacher. And it's just teaching me to get back in touch with myself and what's important to me, and to live by my own values. So I think, you know, if you can overcome the fear and just see the gifts that cancer has to offer, it puts you in a much better space. And that's what I've been lucky enough to be able to do.
If you're stuck in that mode, you're going to have worse outcomes. You have to get to the point where, well, I got to do everything I can to survive, but I'm okay if I don't. And there's a purpose in that too. Dealing with that emotional piece is a key component. I love it when I hear my patients get to the point of saying, this cancer was an absolute blessing for me because, you know, whatever, maybe it be because I was a workaholic and I didn't spend any time with my family. And this made me, you know, opened up my eyes to that, or because of whatever reason.
It's always a matter of the spiritual side, the mental, because this body is, yes, it's a vessel that we live into this in the vessel. This is actually our temple. So I think it's our duty to take care about the temple, but especially the mind, because the mind is killing many people. As a doctor, we should implement everything, because we are not just blood and flesh. We are much more than that, because sometimes we can see the aura of a human. You can sense it, you can perceive it, and you say, here's something very wrong.
I'll never forget when the nurse there was just like, you're known as the wellness warrior, right? I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, here you're gonna relax. You're gonna give yourself permission to be a beautiful mess. For me, in my heart of hearts, I believe that mine was more emotional, especially, you know, with breast cancer, the nurturing and over-giving. You'll hear tons of women say that, you know, like not, you know, putting yourself last. So that really was a component, but on top of the external stuff, you know, it was just a recipe for a wake-up call.
There's something inside the energy which can help you to do magical things, to create miracles. So this intelligence, insight of the body knows exactly what to do for you as soon as you wake it up.
you.